I collapsed next to the stove on a Tuesday afternoon. One moment I was stirring pasta sauce, the next I was staring at the ceiling tiles in the emergency room, fluorescent lights burning into my retinas. A nurse with kind eyes was asking me questions I couldn't quite process. They'd gone through my phone, called everyone listed under family. No one came. Not my daughter Rachel, not my son-in-law, not even my granddaughter who lived 20 minutes away. But sitting in the plastic chair beside my hospital bed, holding a cup of terrible coffee, was Daniel Martinez, my first love, the man I hadn't seen in 37 years. When I saw him there, tears started rolling down my cheeks before I could stop them. He just squeezed my hand and said, "You're not alone anymore." But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 3 months to when I still believed family meant something. 3 months earlier, I was standing in my kitchen in Phoenix, the same kitchen where I'd later collapse, making Sunday dinner for 12 people. Rachel and her family were coming over, along with some of her friends. I'd spent all morning preparing Rachel's favorite dishes, roasting a chicken the way she liked it, making my famous potato salad. My feet ached. I was 62 years old and still playing the role of family matriarch, still convinced that if I just kept giving, kept serving, kept smiling, everything would be fine. The heat in the kitchen was oppressive, despite the air conditioning running full blast. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I checked the chicken one more time, basting it with the herb butter I'd made from scratch. My lower back throbbed from standing so long, but I ignored it. This dinner had to be perfect. Maybe if it was perfect, Rachel would smile at me the way she used to when she was little. Maybe if everything was just right, whatever distance had grown between us would disappear. I'd set the dining room table the night before, using my good china. The white tablecloth was pressed and spotless. I'd even picked fresh flowers from the garden, arranging them in my mother's crystal vase. Everything had to show Rachel how much I cared, how much effort I put into keeping our family together. Looking back, I can see the desperation in those preparations. The way I was trying to buy love with roasted chicken and potato salad. The doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my apron and hurried to answer, already apologizing for the mess, even though the house was spotless. Rachel walked in without looking at me. Her friend Melissa followed, and I noticed something strange. Melissa's eyes flickered to me, then away quickly, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. That's the first time I felt it. That weird tension in the air, like walking into a room where everyone had just been talking about you. You know what I'm talking about, right? That sudden silence that feels heavy. "Hi, Mom," Rachel said, her voice flat. She brushed past me into the living room, her designer handbag swinging from her shoulder. She'd recently gotten a promotion at the law firm where she worked, and I'd been so proud. I'd called all my friends to tell them, but she hadn't called to tell me herself. I'd found out from her Facebook post. "Rachel, honey, you look wonderful," I said, reaching out to touch her arm. She moved slightly, just enough that my hand grasped air instead. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes. Can I get you something to drink?" "I'll get it myself," she said, still not meeting my eyes. Melissa shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Patterson," she said, her voice too bright, too forced. "Your home is lovely." "Please, call me Janet," I said for probably the 100th time. I'd known Melissa for 5 years, but she insisted on the formality, creating distance with every Mrs. Patterson. I brushed it off, made excuses. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just tired. Rachel had been distant lately, sure, but she was busy. She had a demanding job, a teenager to raise, a household to manage. I told myself I was being paranoid. Family is family, I kept thinking. You don't question family. My mother used to say blood is thicker than water, and I'd built my entire life around that principle. I'd raised Rachel mostly on my own after her father and I divorced when she was 8. Worked 3 jobs some years so she could have dance lessons, summer camp, a college education without debt. I never asked for thanks. That's what mothers do. We sacrifice. We endure. We keep the family together no matter what. Looking back now, I can see how that belief became my prison. But that Sunday, I just smiled and served the food and pretended not to notice how Rachel's friends wouldn't quite meet my eyes. More guests arrived. Mark, Rachel's husband, gave me a quick nod before heading straight to the living room where Rachel was. Emma, my 15-year-old granddaughter, at least gave me a hug, though it was brief and her eyes were glued to her phone. Rachel's friends, Jennifer and Stephanie, came together, their conversation dying the moment they saw me at the door. Come in, I said, ushering them inside. Make yourselves at home. But they didn't. They perched on the edge of my furniture like birds ready to take flight. They accepted drinks with tight smiles. They spoke in low voices that stopped whenever I came near. I felt like an intruder in my own home. Dinner was awkward. Conversation stopped when I entered the dining room. At one point, I heard Rachel's friend Jennifer whisper something about controlling behavior. And when I asked what she meant, everyone suddenly got very interested in their plates. Rachel changed the subject quickly. Too quickly. Mom, did you remember to make the potatoes without onions? She asked, her fork hovering over her plate. You know Emma doesn't like onions. Of course, sweetheart, I said. I always remember Emma's preferences. Do you? Rachel's voice had an edge I didn't understand. Because last time was fine, Rachel, Mark interrupted, giving his wife a warning look. Everything is delicious, Janet. Thank you for having us. The conversation limped along. People complimented the food with words that felt hollow. Emma asked to be excused early. Rachel's friends exchanged glances I couldn't interpret. I felt my chest tighten, but pushed the feeling down. After everyone left, I spent 2 hours cleaning up alone. Rachel had left early, claiming a headache. I stood at the sink washing dishes, my hands pruny in the hot water, and tried to figure out what I'd done wrong. The kitchen was finally clean, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had broken during that dinner, something I couldn't name or fix. I dried the last plate and put it away, then stood in the middle of my empty kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock. The silence felt accusatory somehow, like even my house was judging me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the evening in my head, searching for clues. The way Melissa had looked at me. The hushed conversations. The sudden silences. Something was happening. Something just beyond my grasp, like trying to remember a dream after waking. I got out of bed at 3 a.m. and pulled out old photo albums, looking at pictures of Rachel as a child. Her gap-toothed smile. Her ballet recital at age 7. Her high school graduation. Where had that bright, happy girl gone? When had she stopped looking at me with love in her eyes? Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued. Rachel would call less frequently. When she did visit, she'd stay in the doorway, never quite coming inside. Her husband, Mark, started making excuses not to come to family dinners. My granddaughter, Emma, who used to sleep over every weekend, suddenly had too much homework, too many activities. I was being slowly cut out, surgically removed from my own family. And the worst part? I had no idea why. I tried everything to fix it. I sent thoughtful texts that went unanswered for days. I dropped off Emma's favorite cookies at their house, leaving them on the porch like an offering. I offered to babysit, to help with household projects, to do anything that might earn me back into their good graces. Each attempt was met with polite deflection, or worse, silence. Thanks for the cookies, Mom, Rachel texted 3 days after I'd left them. You didn't have to do that. But I did have to. I had to keep trying. I had to keep reaching out. Because if I stopped, what did that say about me as a mother? If I gave up, didn't that prove I didn't care enough? I replayed every conversation, every interaction, trying to find the moment I'd messed up. Had I said something offensive? Been too critical? I started second-guessing everything. Maybe I was too pushy, Maybe I called too often. Maybe I was, I don't know, suffocating her somehow. That's what happens when someone gaslights you, though I didn't have a name for it yet. You start to believe you're the problem. I began censoring myself in every interaction. I'd write a text message, delete it, rewrite it 5 times before sending something bland and innocuous. Hope you're having a good day. Thinking of you. Messages that couldn't possibly offend anyone, but also meant nothing at all. Rachel would respond with thumbs-up emojis or single-word replies. Thanks. Busy. Later. I read somewhere, maybe in one of those articles you see online, that in a study with 3,000 betrayed people, 94% developed trauma symptoms. At the time, I didn't think it applied to me. I wasn't betrayed. I was just, disconnected from my daughter. That's normal, right? Adult children need space. I kept telling myself that. Kept making excuses, kept swallowing the hurt like it was medicine I had to take to get better. My friend Gloria told me I looked tired. My neighbor asked if I was feeling okay. I smiled and said I was fine. Fine. That word became my default setting. How are you? Fine. Everything okay? Fine. It's funny how we use that word like armor, isn't it? A shield against having to admit we're drowning. But I wasn't fine. I was losing weight. My clothes hung loose on my frame. I'd stand in the shower and forget what I was supposed to be doing, just letting the water run over me while my mind spun in circles. I stopped going to my book club, stopped calling friends. What would I say to them? That my daughter didn't want me around, and I didn't know why? That I was slowly being erased from my own family? The humiliation was the hardest part to swallow. I started noticing it in other places too. At church, some of the women who used to greet me warmly now offered tight smiles and quick hellos before hurrying away. At the grocery store, I ran into one of Rachel's colleagues who literally turned and walked the other direction when she saw me. What had Rachel been saying about me? What stories had she told? I felt like I was living in some bizarre alternate reality where I'd become the villain of a story I didn't even know was being written. Every time I saw someone whispering, I wondered if they were talking about me. Every time someone ended a conversation abruptly when I approached, I died a little inside. But I kept my head up, kept my mouth shut, because that's what you do, right? You protect your family's reputation even when they're destroying yours. One particularly bad day, I ran into Rachel's friend Jennifer at the post office. I'd known Jennifer since she and Rachel became friends in college. I'd helped Jennifer move into her first apartment. I'd brought her soup when she had the flu. But when she saw me in line, her expression hardened. "Jennifer," I said, trying to sound casual. "How are you?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson." The formality was like a slap. She'd called me Janet for 15 years. "I haven't seen you in a while. How's work going?" "It's fine." She wouldn't meet my eyes, just stared at the package in her hands. "Maybe we could grab coffee sometime," I ventured, desperation making me bold. "I'd love to catch up." "I don't think that's a good idea." Her voice was cold. "Rachel has told me what you're like. I think it's best if we keep our distance." She moved to a different line, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and my face burning with shame. What you're like. What did that mean? What had Rachel said about me? The breaking point came at a neighborhood barbecue in early September. It was one of those perfect Phoenix evenings when the heat finally breaks and the sky turns that particular shade of purple you only get in the desert. I'd brought my famous 7-layer dip, the one everyone always compliments. Rachel was there with her family, though she hadn't told me she'd be coming. I found out when I arrived and saw her car in the driveway. My heart lifted. Maybe this was a chance to reconnect. Maybe whatever had been wrong was over now. I approached her with a smile, ready to hug her, and she physically stepped back. Like I was contagious, like I was dangerous. The people around us noticed. I saw their eyes dart between us, hungry for drama. I felt my face flush with shame, but kept smiling, because what else could I do? Make a scene? Prove I was exactly what she'd apparently been saying I was? "Rachel, honey," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't know you'd be here. This is a nice surprise." "Is it?" Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Of course it is. I've missed you. We haven't talked in—" "I've been busy, Mom. You know that." "I know, sweetheart. I just thought maybe we could find some time." "I can't do this right now." She turned away from me, literally turned her back on me in front of 20 neighbors. I stood there frozen, my 7-layer dip in my hands, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. That's when Melissa pulled me aside. Rachel's friend Melissa, the one who could never quite look at me. We ended up standing by the pool, away from the crowd, and she took a deep breath like she was about to jump off a cliff. "You need to know something," she said, and then she told me. Rachel had been telling people I was manipulative, controlling, that I'd made her childhood miserable with my unreasonable demands and emotional manipulation, that I guilt-tripped her constantly, made everything about me, couldn't respect boundaries, that she'd had to go to therapy to deal with the trauma of being raised by me. "Therapy?" I whispered. "She's in therapy because of me?" Melissa nodded, looking uncomfortable. "She talks about it a lot, about how hard it was growing up with you, how you made her feel like she could never be good enough, how you used your sacrifices as a weapon to control her." Me. The woman who'd worked herself half to death to give her everything. The woman who'd never missed a dance recital, never forgot a birthday, never stopped believing in her, even when she failed. I stood there while Melissa talked, and I swear I could feel the ground opening up beneath me. My stomach dropped. My hands went numb. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, but my throat had closed up and no sound would come out. "I thought you should know," Melissa said, "because Rachel's planning to cut you off completely. She's told us she's going no contact with you after Emma's birthday next month. She's been preparing for it for weeks." "No contact?" The words felt foreign in my mouth. "But why? What did I do?" "I don't know if I should be the one telling you all this," Melissa said, glancing back toward the party. "But I couldn't watch you keep trying when you don't know what's coming. It seemed cruel." I didn't confront Rachel that night. I couldn't. I walked to my car, drove home, and sat in my driveway for an hour, unable to move. The sun set and the streetlights came on, and still I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what Melissa had told me. My daughter was in therapy because of me. She was planning to cut me out of her life. She'd been telling people I was abusive. None of it made sense. None of it matched my memories, my reality, my truth. The next morning, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had I gotten so worn down? The lines around my mouth seemed deeper, carved in by years of swallowing hurt. My eyes looked empty, hollow. I thought about all the times Rachel had said, "I love you, Mom," over the past year. How many of those times had she meant it? Had any of them been real? Or was I just a character in her narrative, the difficult mother she had to manage, the burden she complained about to her friends? I realized I'd been living in a story where I was cast as the villain, and I'd never even seen the script. I spent the morning going through old boxes in my closet, looking for evidence of my own version of events. Report cards where Rachel's teachers praised her happy disposition. Thank you cards she'd made me as a child, covered in glitter and hearts. Letters she'd written from summer camp, telling me she missed me, asking when she could come home. Photos of us laughing together, hugging, her head on my shoulder. All of it felt like evidence in a trial I didn't know I was facing. For days, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake at night replaying my entire relationship with Rachel, looking for the moment it had gone wrong. Had I been too strict? Not strict enough? Too involved? Not involved enough? The questions ate at me. I started doubting everything I'd ever done as a mother. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was controlling. Maybe I had damaged her. Maybe I was the problem. I remembered the time she was 12 and wanted to quit dance. I'd encouraged her to stick with it, told her she'd regret giving up. She'd eventually thanked me for pushing her when she got the lead in her high school production. But now I wondered, had that been controlling? Should I have let her quit? I thought about the time she was 16 and wanted to date a boy I didn't trust. I'd expressed my concerns and she'd been angry for weeks. But I'd been right. He'd ended up cheating on her with her best friend. At the time, she'd come crying to me and I'd held her while she sobbed. But was that memory even real? Or had I twisted it in my own mind? That's what psychological abuse does, you know. It makes you question your own reality until you can't trust your own memories, your own experiences, your own truth. I was drowning in self-doubt and shame, and the worst part was I had no one to talk to about it. Who could I tell? My friends were Rachel's godparents, her former teachers, people who'd watched her grow up. How could I admit that my own daughter thought I was a monster? I tried calling my sister in California. We weren't close, hadn't been since our mother died, but I needed someone. Anyone. "Janet?" she answered, sounding surprised. "Is everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted, my voice cracking. "Rachel and we're not speaking. She's been telling people I was a bad mother, and I don't understand what happened." There was a long pause, too long. "Well," my sister finally said, "you were always very involved in her life. Maybe she just needs some space." "But she's telling people I abused her, that I was manipulative and controlling." Another pause. "I wasn't there, Janet. I don't know what your relationship was like. But maybe you should respect her boundaries." I hung up, feeling worse than before. Even my own sister thought I might be the problem. Then Daniel showed up. I was sitting on my back patio, staring at nothing, when my doorbell rang. It was a Friday afternoon in late September. I almost didn't answer, but something made me get up and walk to the door. When I opened it, there he was. Daniel Martinez. My first love from high school, the boy I'd dated for 3 years before life pulled us in different directions. He looked older, of course. Gray at the temples, lines around his eyes. But those eyes were the same. Brown and kind and steady. I must have looked like a ghost standing there in my bathrobe at 3 in the afternoon because his face shifted into concern immediately. "Janet?" His voice was uncertain, like he wasn't sure I'd remember him. "Daniel," I breathed. "What are you? How did you—" "I heard what happened," he said. "Can I come in?" I should have asked how he heard, who told him, but I was too exhausted to care. I just stepped aside and let him in. He walked into my kitchen, looked around at the dirty dishes in the sink, the mail piled on the counter, the general disarray I'd let accumulate. If he was judged, he didn't show it. He just turned to me and said, "When's the last time you ate something?" I couldn't remember. Days, maybe. "I'm not hungry," I said. That wasn't the question. He opened my refrigerator, found eggs and cheese, and started making an omelet. I watched him move around my kitchen like he belonged there, like it was the most natural thing in the world for him to show up after 37 years and cook me breakfast at 3 in the afternoon. He'd moved back to Phoenix 6 months ago, he told me as he cooked. Divorced, kids grown. He'd run into Gloria at a coffee shop and she'd mentioned, carefully, that I seemed to be going through something, that Rachel and I weren't speaking, that she was worried about me. So he'd come, just like that, showed up at my door because someone he'd loved a lifetime ago might need help. "I don't even know what to say," I admitted, watching him plate the omelet. "This is surreal." "You don't have to say anything," he said. "Just eat." We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made 1,000 family dinners, where I'd helped Rachel with homework, where I'd taught her to bake cookies. He listened while I talked, really listened, didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions, didn't tell me I was overreacting. When I finished, when I'd emptied out all the poison that had been building up inside me, he just said, "I believe you." Those 3 words broke something open in me. I started crying, really crying for the first time since this whole nightmare began. He held my hand across the table and let me fall apart. I cried for the daughter I'd lost, for the relationship that had been poisoned by lies I couldn't defend against, for the years I'd spent sacrificing and giving and loving, only to be cast as the villain. I cried until there was nothing left, until I was empty and exhausted and strangely lighter. "I don't know what to do," I whispered when I could finally speak again. "I don't know how to fix this." "Maybe you can't," Daniel said gently. "Maybe some things can't be fixed. Maybe you just have to save yourself. You know, I learned later that American statistics show nearly 5% of seniors suffer psychological abuse every year. 5%. That's millions of people. Millions of mothers and fathers being gaslit and slandered and cut off by the very children they sacrificed everything for. I was a statistic, a number in a study about elder abuse. But sitting there with Daniel, I started to feel like maybe I was still a person too. Someone who deserved to be heard, to be believed, to be treated with basic dignity. He came back the next day, and the day after that. We started talking about old times, before Rachel, before the divorce, before everything got complicated. He reminded me of who I'd been before I became just a mother, just a provider, just a woman waiting for her daughter to love her back. "Do you remember that summer we drove to California?" he asked one afternoon. We were sitting on my back patio, drinking iced tea. "You wanted to see the ocean." I smiled, remembering. "We slept in the car because we couldn't afford a hotel. And you didn't complain once. You thought it was an adventure." He looked at me. "What happened to that girl? The one who thought sleeping in a car was an adventure?" "She grew up," I said. "She had responsibilities." "Or she forgot who she was," he said softly. "You used to write, Janet. Beautiful poetry. You were going to be a journalist." I'd forgotten that, completely forgotten. Rachel's father hadn't supported my writing. He'd said it was a waste of time, that I needed to focus on practical things. And after the divorce, I'd been too busy surviving to write anything but grocery lists and permission slips. "I haven't written in 30 years, I admitted. "Maybe it's time to start again." I'd had dreams once. I'd wanted to write. I'd wanted to travel. I'd wanted things for myself. Somewhere along the way, I'd sacrificed all of that on the altar of motherhood, convinced that my only purpose was to serve my child. And now that child had decided I was disposable. I started making plans, not revenge plans, not dramatic confrontation plans, just escape plans. I couldn't stay in this house anymore, in this life where I was the villain of someone else's story. I started packing slowly, methodically. A box here, a bag there. My favorite books. Old photos from before Rachel was born. My grandmother's jewelry. The painting I'd bought myself on my 50th birthday. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Didn't leave notes or explanations. I just quietly, carefully began the process of removing myself from a situation that was killing me. Daniel offered me his guest room while I figured things out. I accepted. Some nights I'd wake up panicking, wondering if I was making a mistake, if I should try one more time to fix things with Rachel. But then I'd remember the look on her face at that barbecue, the physical step backward, the revulsion, and I'd know I was doing the right thing. I wrote Rachel one letter. Just one. I spent days on it, trying to find the right words. "Dear Rachel," it began. "I don't know what I did to make you hate me. I've searched my memories, my conscience, my heart, and I can't find it. But I know you believe I hurt you, and for that, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that your memories of childhood are painful. I'm sorry that you feel the need to protect yourself from me. I'm sorry I couldn't be the mother you needed. But I can't keep trying to earn forgiveness for crimes I don't remember committing. I can't keep apologizing for a version of myself I don't recognize. So I'm letting you go. Not with anger, but with love. I hope you find peace. I hope you find healing. And I hope someday you'll remember the good parts too. I love you. I always will. Mom." I never sent it. I put it in a drawer and left it there, one more thing to pack away with my old life. The confrontation I'd been dreading came in mid-October at Rachel's birthday dinner. I hadn't planned to go, but Emma had called me crying, begging me to come, saying she missed me. So I went. Walked into that restaurant with my head high and my heart hammering. The whole family was there. Rachel's in-laws, her friends, her husband's colleagues. I sat at the end of the table, the seat farthest from Rachel. For an hour, I made polite conversation with Mark's parents, ate my meal, and pretended everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. Every time Rachel laughed at someone else's joke, every time she smiled at someone else's comment, I felt the knife twist deeper. This was a preview of my future, watching my daughter live her life from the outside, always at the margins, never included. I waited until everyone had ordered, until the polite small talk had died down. Then I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "I have something to say," I announced. The table went silent. Rachel's face went white. "Mom, don't," she said. "Not here. Not now. Yes, here. Yes, now." I pulled out my phone with trembling hands. "Because I'm done being silent about what you've been doing to me." I told them everything. Every lie Rachel had spread. Every story she'd twisted. Every time she'd painted me as a monster while playing the victim. I pulled out my phone and read text messages from years ago. Rachel thanking me for my support, telling me I was the best mother anyone could ask for. I showed them photos of us together, smiling, happy, before she'd decided to rewrite our history. "This is Rachel at age 7, I said, holding up my phone. After her first ballet recital. She wrote on the back, "To the best mommy in the world." "This is Rachel at 12, telling me I was her hero." "This is Rachel at 18, thanking me for working 3 jobs so she could go to college debt-free." "This is Rachel at 25, on her wedding day, telling me she couldn't have done any of it without me." Rachel sat there frozen, her face white. Some people looked uncomfortable. Some looked angry. Her friend Jennifer actually got up and left. But I kept talking because I was done being silent. "I wasn't perfect," I said. "I made mistakes. I was a single mother working multiple jobs, trying to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. I was tired. I was stressed. Sometimes I was impatient. But I loved you, Rachel. I loved you with everything I had. And I don't understand how loving you turned me into the villain of your story." When I finished, Rachel didn't apologize, didn't cry, didn't admit anything. She just looked at me with cold eyes and said, "You're making a scene." Like that was the worst thing I could do. Make a scene. Be loud about my pain. Refuse to quietly accept her version of reality. "Yes," I said, "I'm making a scene, because I'm done being silent while you destroy my reputation. I'm done accepting blame for abuse that never happened. I'm done being your villain." I looked around the table at all these people who'd heard her stories about me, who'd formed their opinions based on her lies, and I realized something. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need them to believe me. I just needed to tell my truth, put it out there in the world, and let people do with it what they wanted. So I picked up my purse, told Emma I loved her, and walked out of that restaurant. Daniel was waiting in the parking lot. He'd insisted on coming with me, staying nearby in case I needed support. "How do you feel?" he asked as I got into his car. "Free," I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt free. We drove to my house one last time to get the last of my things. And then I left. Just like that. 34 years in that house, and I walked away in one afternoon. Rachel still tells her stories. I know she does because I hear about it through the grapevine. She's the victim in her narrative, the daughter whose terrible mother finally showed her true colors by abandoning the family. She gets sympathy from her friends. She gets to play the role of wounded hero. And you know what? I've made peace with that, because the truth is, I can't control her story. I can only control mine. Do you think that was fair? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Would you have fought harder, confronted her sooner, or would you have done what I did and just walked away to save yourself? I'm curious, because some days I still wonder if I should have tried harder, pushed more, demanded that she face what she'd done. But most days, I know I made the right choice. Sometimes, the only winning move is not to play. I moved into a small apartment in Scottsdale, bright and sunny with a balcony overlooking the mountains. Daniel helped me set it up. We painted the walls a warm yellow, hung my favorite pictures, set up my desk by the window where the light is perfect in the mornings. And I started writing. Not just journaling, but really writing, telling my story, putting words to all the feelings I'd swallowed for so long. At first, it was just for me, a way to process what had happened, to reclaim my narrative. But as I wrote, I realized other people needed to hear this. Other mothers and fathers who'd been cast as villains by their adult children. Other people who'd been gaslit and slandered and cut off. So I turned my story into a memoir. It's not published yet, but it will be. And maybe it'll help someone. Maybe someone will read it and realize they're not crazy, not wrong, not the monster they've been made out to be. The writing came easier than I expected. All those years of swallowing my words, censoring my thoughts, made them come pouring out now. I wrote about Rachel's childhood, the good parts she seemed to have forgotten. I wrote about the sacrifices I'd made, not to guilt anyone, but to remember my own truth. I wrote about the slow erosion of our relationship, the confusion and pain of being cut off from your own child. And I wrote about finding myself again, rediscovering the woman I'd been before I became just a mother. Daniel read every word. He'd sit beside me on the couch, reading chapters as I finished them, offering encouragement and occasionally a gentle suggestion. He never tried to change my truth or soften my pain. He just witnessed it, held space for it, reminded me I had the right to tell my story my way. Here's what I learned through all of this, what I need you to understand if you take nothing else from my story. Knowing your legal rights is crucial. Too often we think we're powerless, especially as we get older. We think we just have to accept whatever our family dishes out because, what? Blood is thicker than water? But that's not true. Elder abuse is real, and psychological abuse absolutely counts. In many states, what Rachel did to me, the deliberate destruction of my reputation and isolation from family, could be considered abuse. There are legal protections. There are resources. If you're experiencing this, or if you know someone who is, please look into elder abuse laws in your state. Contact your local area agency on aging. Talk to a lawyer who specializes in elder law. Document everything. Save all communications. Gather evidence. I wish I'd known all this earlier. I wish someone had told me that I didn't have to just accept being treated this way. I consulted with an elder law attorney about 6 weeks after I moved out. Her name was Margaret Chen, and she was in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes occasionally. "Do you want to pursue legal action?" she asked when I finished. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just want to know what my rights are. I want to know if what she did to me is actually abuse or if I'm just being oversensitive." "What she did is absolutely abuse," Margaret said firmly. "Reputational abuse, isolation, financial manipulation if she prevented you from seeing your granddaughter in an attempt to control your behavior. These are all recognized forms of elder abuse. You could potentially sue for defamation if she's spreading provably false statements about you. You could seek a restraining order if she's harassing you. You have options." "But she's my daughter," I said, the words catching in my throat. "That doesn't give her the right to abuse you," Margaret said gently. "Family members can be abusers too. In fact, they often are. The legal system recognizes that. I didn't sue Rachel, didn't get a restraining order. But knowing I could, knowing I had legal standing, knowing that what happened to me was recognized as abuse by the law, that helped. It validated my experience in a way nothing else had. Beyond the legal stuff, there are emotional rights too. You have the right to set boundaries, to say no, to protect yourself even if it means cutting off family members. That goes against everything we're taught, I know. We're supposed to keep the family together at all costs. We're supposed to sacrifice and forgive and turn the other cheek. But what happens when keeping the family together means destroying yourself? What happens when the cost of maintaining that relationship is your mental health, your self-respect, your basic sense of reality? At some point, you have to choose yourself. And that's not selfish. That's survival. If you suspect someone is being manipulated or abused by family members, help them see their options. Sometimes the person being abused can't see it themselves. They're too close, too invested in the family mythology. They need someone from the outside to say, "This isn't normal. This isn't okay. You deserve better." Gloria came to visit me in my new apartment about a month after I moved. She brought wine and Chinese takeout and sat on my new couch looking around at the space I'd created. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Lighter, like you've put down something heavy you'd been carrying." I thought about that. "I have," I said. "I put down the belief that I had to earn love from someone who'd decided I wasn't worth loving. I put down the responsibility for a relationship that one person was determined to destroy. I put down the guilt and shame for crimes I didn't commit." "Good," Gloria said fiercely. "It's about damn time." We drank wine and ate orange chicken and didn't talk about Rachel. For the first time in months, I had a conversation that didn't revolve around my pain, my confusion, my desperate attempts to understand what had gone wrong. We talked about books and politics and Gloria's upcoming trip to Italy. Normal things. Pleasant things. I realized how much of my life had been consumed by trying to fix my relationship with Rachel, how little space I'd left for anything else. And to those of you walking this difficult road right now, feeling alone and crazy and wrong, I want you to know something. You're not alone. There are more of us than you think. People who've been cut off and slandered and cast as villains in someone else's story. People who had to choose between their own well-being and their family's version of reality. People who are rebuilding their lives after their children decided they were disposable. It's hard. Some days it's almost unbearable. But you can survive this. You can find peace on the other side. You can build a new life that doesn't revolve around trying to earn love from people who've decided you don't deserve it. It took me 62 years to learn that lesson, but better late than never, right? I joined a support group for estranged parents. I found it online, a weekly video call with 10 or 12 other mothers and fathers who'd been cut off by their adult children. The first time I joined, I cried through the entire session. Not sad tears exactly. Relief tears, because everyone there understood. They'd all been through some version of what I'd experienced. They'd all been gaslit, slandered, cut off. They'd all spent months or years wondering what they'd done wrong. One woman, Patricia, told a story eerily similar to mine. Her son had gone to therapy and decided she was the source of all his problems. Never mind that she'd raised him alone after his father died. Never mind that she'd sacrificed her career to be home with him. In his narrative, she was controlling and manipulative. He'd cut her off 5 years ago. She hadn't met her 2 grandchildren. "Do you regret having him?" someone asked her. Patricia thought for a long moment. "No," she finally said. "I regret how much of myself I lost trying to be the perfect mother. I regret believing that my only value was in serving my child. I regret not saving some of my love and energy for myself. But I don't regret him. He gave me beautiful years, even if he's chosen to forget them." That resonated with me. I didn't regret Rachel. I regretted losing myself in motherhood. I regretted building my entire identity around being her mother, so that when she rejected me, I had nothing left. But I didn't regret the years of loving her, even if she now remembered them differently than I did. The other day, I was sitting on my balcony watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Daniel was there, reading the newspaper, and I realized something. I was happy. Not just okay, not just surviving, but genuinely happy for the first time in years, maybe in decades. I have my writing. I have my small circle of real friends. I have Daniel, who came back into my life exactly when I needed him. I have my freedom and my truth and my peace. Rachel has her narrative, her version of events where she's the hero and I'm the villain. She can keep it. I don't need to be the hero of her story. I just need to be the author of mine. And in my story, I'm not a monster. I'm a woman who loved deeply, sacrificed endlessly, and finally learned to save herself. Emma reached out to me about 3 months after I left. She sent a text late one night. "Grandma, I miss you. Can we talk?" I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, to grab onto this lifeline with both hands. But I'd learned something about protecting myself, about setting boundaries. "I miss you too, sweetheart," I wrote back. "But I need you to understand something. I can't be in a relationship where I'm constantly defended against. If you want to see me, it needs to be because you want to, not because you pity me or feel obligated, and it needs to be separate from your mother's narrative about me. Can you do that?" She didn't respond for 2 days. When she finally did, it was thoughtful. "I don't know what happened between you and Mom. She says one thing, but I remember something different. I remember you always being there for me. I remember feeling loved. I don't understand why everything changed, but I miss my grandmother. Can I come visit you?" She came the following weekend. We sat on my balcony, drinking lemonade, and she cried, telling me about the past few months, how confused she'd been, how Rachel had told her I was toxic and needed to be cut off, how she'd missed me but felt guilty for missing me, like she was betraying her mother by loving her grandmother. "You don't have to choose," I told her. "You can love both of us. But I also can't let her control my relationship with you. If you want to see me, it needs to be between us. I won't put you in the middle, but I also won't accept breadcrumbs of affection on your mother's terms." She nodded. "I understand, and I want you in my life, Grandma, on our terms." We see each other every few weeks now. She doesn't tell Rachel. I don't ask her to keep secrets, but I also don't pry into their relationship. Emma is finding her own way, making her own choices, and I'm grateful to be part of her life again, even if it's complicated. That Tuesday when I collapsed in my kitchen, when they took me to the emergency room and called my family and no one came, I learned something important. The family I'd built my life around, the daughter I'd sacrificed everything for, had decided I wasn't worth showing up for. But Daniel came. Daniel, who'd loved me 37 years ago, who'd known me before I became just a mother, just a martyr. He came without hesitation, without conditions. He sat in that uncomfortable hospital chair and held my hand and reminded me that I was still worth showing up for. The doctor said I'd collapsed from exhaustion and malnutrition. My body had finally given out under the weight of months of stress and self-neglect. They kept me overnight for observation. Daniel stayed the whole time, sleeping in that awful chair, bringing me decent coffee in the morning. When they discharged me the next day, he drove me home to my apartment, not to the house where I'd collapsed, not back to my old life. Home to my new life, the one where I mattered. "Thank you for staying with me until the end. I know this was long and heavy and probably hit close to home for some of you. That's why I wanted to share it. If even one person reads this and realizes they're not alone, that they're not crazy, that they have options and rights and the power to change their story, then it was worth it. I want to hear from you. What city are you in right now? What time is it where you are? Are you listening to this on your commute, doing dishes, lying in bed, unable to sleep? Drop a comment and let me know you're there. And tell me honestly, what would you have done in my place? Would you have fought differently, left sooner, stayed longer? I'm genuinely curious about your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, if you felt seen or heard or understood, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe if you haven't already,